I'm back with yet another rendition of me reviewing movies on my cell phone. Poorly. Today, we're going to review Transformers Dark of the Moon. This is the third movie in the series of Michael Bay films. I've mentioned before these movies get progressively more and more crappy. They just do. It is what it is. Dark of the Moon probably doesn't deliver as well as it should in terms of anything. I mean, the movie is basically a carbon fucking copy of the first two movies. Yes, I enjoy it, but I can honestly say with each successive film, I enjoy it less. Um, Characters like Shockwave were completely a waste of time in the movie. They're there to show up and die. They really have no real importance to them. Especially the Decepticon characters. The Decepticon characters really are just cannon fodder to be just wiped off the map, and even more so, we had even more of these robots that were essentially just skeletons and guns. Who gives a fuck about those characters on an overall basis? The good thing is about this film, less skids and mudflap. They were. I don't even think they were in this movie. As a matter of fact, I think they kind of just were. They were there, but they were just background noise, really. One of the things that really annoys the crap out of me is with this one is we barely discuss what happened to some of the Transformers that were introduced in the last film. RC, Sideswipe, they're all just fucking missing. They're not even a concern, realistically. They're not even in the film, I don't even believe. I don't think they even mentioned them. I know they are mentioned in the prequel and sequel comics to the first and third film, and it is talked about that the characters get killed. But I mean, one little line of dialogue could have easily cleared up the mystery of where these fucking characters went to. On an overall basis, it just becomes clearer and clearer that as these Bay films come out and more they come out, we're less concerned with actually making a decent film and more concerned with just essentially throwing characters and explosions at you and recycling the same plot from each film over and over again, where essentially it's a chase to go get something, to find something, to gather the pieces to something across the globe. And in this case, they're looking for, the first movie they're looking for the cube, the second movie was the Energon Harvester and the Matrix. In this film, it was the pillars to bring the space bridge to life, to have Cybertron brought to Earth. Now, again, I'm still waiting for a Transformers film where Megatron is actually the leader of the bad guys. Because he's not the leader of the bad guys in this one either. He realistically is just the poor dope in charge, but he's not in charge of anything because it ends up being, spoiler alert, it ends up being the Prime that they find it. And even worse, it just becomes, you gotta look at these films in a certain respect. I mean, I know they're not going to be brilliant or even close to what Generation 1 was. But they're basically stealing plots from Generation 1 as it is anyhow. In this, where the Autobots get banished from Earth, that happened in an episode. Where the Decepticons take over Chicago, that's kind of something that happened in one of the episodes. They did an episode where they took over, I believe it was New York City. Even bringing Cybertron to Earth was all something done. So, he's already ripping off plots from the TV series, from the cartoon, and poorly, and poorly too. But that being said, the overall tone of this film, it just feels cheap. I mean, right off the bat, one of the characters is Laserbeak. Laserbeak, if you're not familiar with the character in the Generation 1, was one of Soundwave, the blue cassette player's tapes that would transform into a buzzard. In this, he could apparently transform into fucking anything. It was just so lazy, it was beyond ridiculous. He transforms into a copier, into a bird, into a little girl. It was fucking ridiculous. I mean, at this point, they really have no established transformation pattern. They just could be anything they fucking want to be. Then our early Transformers, they're fucking They're metamorphs, is what they are at this point. So while it makes very little sense that these characters can transform into, or limit themselves to transform into cars, when Laserbeak can apparently transform into goddamn anything. We're also talking a lot of undeveloped characters in this movie. Wheeljack is in this movie, one of the fan favorites, and he honestly isn't even Wheeljack in any way, shape, or form. As a matter of fact, his character isn't even called Wheeljack, it's called Q. I have no idea why. None at all. There really is no explanation behind it, but in some respects it makes some sense because it's not Wheeljack, so who gives a fuck what you call it at this point? And again, this is Michael Bay just not giving a fuck about what we do with it, or whether anything even remotely comes close to what we enjoyed in the original series. So basically, we're at a point now where, if you want to call this the Transformers, it's the Transformers only in name. These characters have become less and less like anything like what the original characters were. They're big robots who change in the cars, and they're essentially Transformers. You've got a character on screen who's Megatron, who kinda is a bad guy. He's certainly not the Megatron you know. Starscream, Wheeljack, Wheelie, all these characters, they're characters in name only. They have almost no resemblance anymore, or in terms of names, personalities, looks. They don't resemble your characters in any way, shape, or form. It's like taking Ellen Ripley and making Ellen Ripley to changing the character to being, I don't know, a virus, a computer virus, and just calling it the computer virus of Ellen Ripley. Nobody gives a shit at this point. It's so far removed from the original the original source material, that how do you give a shit about this? It's hard to. And that being said, we also we dumped the character because of her unbelievably awful racist comments, and so the sexy character of the movie was dumped out, and they replaced her with a blonde with an accent. And I'll be honest, I don't even know who she is realistically. It didn't matter much. They just basically swapped out one sexy girl for another one. Was she bad? No, she wasn't horrible, but you spent 2 movies building one character, and then you just swap her out for another, which just goes to show how important even the human characters were in this film, and that even goes on even further later in the franchise. That not even the characters that these movies are supposed to design to support are that interesting or worthwhile, that they have to stay there, and you have to keep that you would have to have a relationship with these characters in terms of wanting to see more of them and know more of their story. They're really, it doesn't make a difference. They're fucking pointless. They're as pointless as any other character, like Wheeljack. Wheeljack was in this movie, like I said. His character's name was Q. He looks nothing like the original character, and he gets killed off. He was there for nothing, realistically. He really provides no real actual substance for a storyline. He's there to provide some accessories for Sam to use in combating Transformers, and then he's there to die. It doesn't make a fucking difference at all. And it just goes to show even the human characters were at that point as well. For whatever reason ever, we still have Agent Simmons in the movie, and there's still just ridiculous crap to be added for his character as well. The whole series at this point is a joke. But at the very least, you're thinking to yourself, okay, well, they're wrapping up a trilogy, so what's going to happen in this? And essentially, this was really just a movie to give more, keep cashing in on the same recycled shit over and over again. Overall, it's overdone, it's overblown, the characters are underdeveloped, the explosions are ridiculous, the situations are ridiculous. I essentially can honestly say this is probably the last Transformer movie I enjoyed to any degree, and you can hear from my conversation about this now, my review of this. I didn't even really care for it that much. It's the last watchable of the Transformer films. The next 2 will be even, reviews for this will even be worse. overall, it revolves around this plot to bring Cybertron to Earth and repopulate Earth with Cybertronians and use the resources of Earth, strip mine Earth to make Cybertron better. And it falls apart, of course, and the good guys defeat the bad guys, and a lot of characters get killed off because I think there was a concept at one point that maybe this was going to be the last of the Transformer movies, that they at least wanted to try and wrap up some storyline. I think there's just less and less effort put into each one of these films successively, and this is probably the point where you can start to say to yourself, while the other two may have been a little outlandish, a little ridiculous, they were still at least enjoyable stories. This one, for me at least, was the turning point where I started to say to myself, do I really want to commit to even seeing any more of these films? And I walked away from it just really not happy with it overall. Was there anything good about the film? I'm hard pressed to pull up anything good. I really am. I'm hard pressed to pull up anything good about the movie. There really wasn't anything worthwhile. Maybe Optimus Prime's giant trailer accessory pack that makes him fly and have all sorts of guns was kind of cool. Beyond that, it really wasn't. It really wasn't all that great. It's watchable in the sense that you can at least sit through the movie and say to yourself, okay, I sat through it. It wasn't good, but it wasn't god awful. I'm not saying I can really recommend it. I mean, if you enjoyed the first two movies, it's okay to watch this one. I'm not sure you would enjoy it as much as the first two, or even as much as, like I said, they get progressively worse. So it's hard to really come up with something and original and positive about these films, especially third film in. One of my biggest gripes with these movies up until here and then is, first of all, aside from the fact that it's recycled plot and the characters the characters don't matter. They're not endearing. They're not any characters that you're going to fall in love with or enjoy and be following for generations. And 30 years later, you're not going to be down the line going, "Oh my God, wasn't wasn't Q in Transformers: Dark of the Moon really awesome?" You're not, because it just doesn't you don't care. One of my other gripes about these movies at this point is each movie spends a little time in the past trying to tell us that the Transformers history and the Earth history have been somehow tied together and somehow match up, and that some plan was set in motion years ago that is just coming to fruition now. That seems to be the running theme in every fucking Transformers film as well. Again, like I said, it's a very recycled plot all around. But one of the things that drives me crazy is the just sheer ridiculousn's in terms of them trying to put together how a plot would work. As a good example, we're supposed to take for granted several plans of the Decepticons are constantly in motion, and somehow fate and happenstance all happens to have it tied to Earth. As a good example, in the first movie, they launched the cube into space from Cybertron, and it just happens to find its way to Earth. Megatron gives chase, and granted, okay, he's following, but he crash landed on Earth. So, you can take that as is for the first film. And in the second film, we're introduced to the fact that even before the cube crashed there, even before, or maybe it's after, I'm not sure exactly, but at some point in time, the same planet that the cube happened to crash on also happened to be the same planet where the Primes eventually visited, built a solar collector, had a falling out with the Fallen, and sacrificed themselves and hid the Matrix there. So, not only do we have the happenstance that the cube happens to be on Earth, not only do we have the happenstance that Megatron happens to find his way to Earth, not only do we have the happenstance that the Primes happen to have gone to Earth, and the solar collector happens to be Earth, and the Matrix happens to be on Earth, and all these are revolving plans that will come to fruition some point in time. We also, in the third film, find out that the Ark crashed on the moon for Earth. Again, another happenstance. Oh, and by the way, I might also point out, in Revenge of the Fallen, we also have the happenstance that the Fallen actually finds his way to Earth. Or he's actually at Jupiter, from what I understand. But he still finds himself to the same solar system as well, because, he's looking for the Matrix as well. So we've got all these moving parts that, there's no way any of it makes any sense, that all this shit just happens to find its way to Earth, and that Megatron had a plan that set this up, and then Megatron, and then the Fallen had another plan for the Collector, and then of course the Prime has another, and I'm forgetting his name, what Prime he is, doesn't fucking matter at this point, realistically, which Prime it is. It's just another Prime who betrays the Autobots, and Sentinel Prime, that's who it is, Sentinel Prime. Sentinel Prime just happens to betray the Autobots, happens to crash land on Earth, happens to have the pillars there. You know what I mean? We're just dealing with a lot of circumstances that just happen to be coming together on Earth, and you just say to yourself, really, is Megatron like the most amazing tactical genius ever, that all this shit just happened to come together at Earth? He had a plan going with the Fallen, he had a plan going for himself, he had a plan going with Sentinel Prime. He had all three of these plans, and they all just happened to culminate on Earth, where a mystery would be buried and dug up years later, decades later, centuries later. It starts to move, and I know you got to suspend a little disbelief from watching these films. Watching any film, realistically, you got to have a little suspension of disbelief. But by the same point in time, it starts to become so fucking insulting, that you cannot not notice that there's no way all these plans would somehow coincidentally snap into place on Earth, coincidentally be set up ahead of time. It just doesn't happen. You have to, at some point in time, stop that fucking plot device and say to yourself, all right, well, we're going to move forward, and it'll just be whatever new things they're cooking up. But we're not going to do that. We're just going to keep recycling the same fucking plot. And by the way, I'd like to point out that ridiculousness that I pointed out just now continues on into the next two films. That same fucking plot device is used again, where Cybertronians found Earth and set something up that would pay off in the future. It doesn't make any sense. You have 5 fucking films where that's the same essential plot point. It's a chase around the world. It's a plot that was set up millions of years ago that somehow coincidentally all tied into Earth. All of this all keeps tying in each fucking film, and it becomes progressively worse. And I know these movies are cash cows, and they bring in a ton of money, and they sell a ton of merchandise and all that. But I mean, I think even by the time I get to the 5th film, you'll see. I think even the fans are starting to get tired of it. What fans, Generation 1 fans were tired of it in the first fucking film. More accepting fans or more broad-based fans were willing to keep watching these movies because it was just a big action fest, and you had a lot of fun watching them. But even I, someone who was very accepting of the first movie and the second movie, and even to a degree this movie, I was somewhat accepting to it. I'm going to tell you, I turn a corner on the next one, and when I get to the next one, you'll see what I have to say about it. But I turned a corner at that one, and honestly, the 5th film, when we come to the 5th film, I didn't even want to go see it in the theaters. I just, everything I saw previews for it, pictures, I just said, this looks like shit, and I hated the last film. I hated the 4th film so fucking much, I really didn't even want to see the 5th film. That's how much. I'll get to the 4th film when I get there, but that's how this series has progressed for me. I'm a fan from day one. Day one, 1984. I've been collecting, watching, enjoying Transformers in various forms, and I'm even. This film started to turn me, and the next film really turns me. I did go see the 5th one in the theaters, but I'll get to that later as to why I went to go see that in the theaters. And I actually had no intention of doing that, but I will get to that when I get to the 5th film. Overall, I mean, if you want to try and sit through Dark of the Moon once, you probably can get through it once. I've watched it maybe a handful of times, 3 or 4 times, maybe. I don't know. It's not that great a film. It's Transformers: Dark of the Moon. I'm giving you a watch at your own risk at this one because it's not that great of a movie. Thanks.